You know, they say that marriage is a partnership, a bond where two people share everything. I used to believe that too. For 30 years, Linda and I shared a life that I thought was built on trust and mutual respect. But like a magician pulling back the curtain, revealing the trick, my world unraveled in ways I never imagined possible. I never fancied myself as a vengeful person, but sometimes life has a way of rewriting your script. It all started on a cold Monday morning in January. I remember the chill in the air because the heater in my car had just given out, and I cursed under my breath as I drove to work. The day felt off, like an itch you can't scratch. One of those days when you feel like the universe is conspiring against you. Little did I know it wasn't the universe, it was much closer to home. At 56, I had carved out a comfortable life for Linda and me. We weren't rich by any stretch, but we had enough to enjoy some of the finer things. We had a cozy house just outside of Boston, a couple of cars, and a little cabin up in New Hampshire where we'd escape during the summer months. My job as a financial analyst was steady, if not a bit mundane. Linda had stopped working after our daughter Emily went off to college, focusing her energy on volunteering and, as she'd often say, finding herself. That Monday morning, as I sat at my desk, sipping my usual black coffee, an email notification pinged, drawing my attention. It was from our bank, a routine alert about a recent transaction. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it, and there it was, a transfer of $150,000 to an account I didn't recognize. A pit formed in my stomach. It's the kind of feeling you get when you realize you've just made a terrible mistake, only I wasn't the one who made it. I called the bank immediately, hoping it was some error. As I navigated the automated menu, dread gnawed at me with each passing second. Finally, a human voice came on. I explained the situation, and after several minutes the representative came back with an answer that turned my blood to ice. The transfer was authorized by Linda. My Linda. I left work early, driving home with a mind swirling in confusion and anger. I needed answers. Rage coursed through me, a foreign, unsettling heat that bubbled beneath the surface. I burst through the front door, calling for Linda, my voice echoing through the empty house. Silence. I tore through the rooms, each one empty, each one mocking me with its tranquility. Hours felt like minutes, and minutes felt like hours, until Linda finally walked through the door. She looked surprised to see me, her eyes wide with something that resembled guilt, but quickly morphed into indifference. I confronted her, demanding an explanation, but all I got was a dismissive shrug. "It's complicated, Richard," she said, her voice cool and detached. "I needed to help my sister. She's been going through a rough patch." Without even discussing it with me, I sputtered, incredulous. "You took our money, Linda, our future, our security." "Your security," she shot back, her words sharp and cutting. "You think just because you bring in the paycheck you own everything. You never asked me what I wanted." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. In that moment I realized how fragile our marriage had become, how paper-thin our connection was. The Linda I saw before me was a stranger, someone I couldn't recognize. I spent that night on the couch trying to piece together the fragments of my life. Sleep was elusive, slipping through my fingers like sand. I knew what I had to do. It was time for damage control. Little did she know I had a fallback plan, a rainy day fund she didn't know about. Years ago, I started a small account in case of emergencies. At the time, it felt unnecessary, almost paranoid. But now it was my lifeline. The next morning, with my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, I contacted a lawyer. I could feel the threads of my old life coming apart, but I was determined not to let it unravel completely. I was wronged, betrayed, but I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new one, where I would make sure justice and maybe a bit of revenge were served in equal measure. The next few days passed in a blur, a haze of legal jargon and a dizzying array of emotions. I spent countless hours with my lawyer, a stern woman named Karen who came highly recommended by a colleague. She had a reputation for being fierce and relentless, qualities I couldn't have appreciated more in that moment. She assured me that we had a good case, that Linda's unauthorized action with our joint account could be grounds for financial restitution in the divorce settlement. It was cold comfort, but it was something to cling to. Back at home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Linda and I existed under the same roof, but we were worlds apart. She maintained her icy demeanor, acting as if the chasm between us was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I found myself constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop, anticipating what I might discover next. I combed through old bank statements and financial records, scrutinizing every transaction with a fine-tooth comb. Trust, once shattered, leaves shards that cut deep, and I was determined not to be blindsided again. One evening, as I sifted through a pile of papers, my phone buzzed with a text message from Emily. My heart clenched. Our daughter was the one bright spot in this storm, her presence a reminder of the life I once cherished. I debated whether to tell her everything. She was in her final year of college, and I didn't want to burden her with the collapse of her parents' marriage. Yet keeping her in the dark felt like another betrayal. "Hey Dad, just checking in, how are things?" Her message read, the simplicity of her words a stark contrast to the chaos engulfing my life. I hesitated before replying, "Hey Em, things are complicated right now. How about a call this weekend?" Her response was immediate. "Sure, Dad. Love you." The exchange left me feeling hollow. I wanted nothing more than to protect her, to shield her from the ugliness of it all. But deep down I knew she deserved the truth. That weekend, as I prepared to call Emily, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would break the news without shattering her. When she picked up, her voice was warm and familiar, a balm to my frayed nerves. I paced the living room as I spoke, recounting the events with as much objectivity as I could muster. There were tears on both ends, and a silence that stretched long and heavy. "Dad, I can't believe this. Mom seemed, I don't know, distant lately, but I never imagined—" Her voice trailed off, laden with disbelief. "It took me by surprise too, Em. I'm sorry you have to go through this." "I'm coming home next weekend," she declared, her tone brooking no argument. I wanted to protest, to tell her to focus on her studies, but I couldn't deny the relief that washed over me at the thought of her presence. "All right, sweetheart, we'll figure this out together." The week crawled by as I awaited her visit, each day a struggle against the bitterness that threatened to consume me. I threw myself into work, finding solace in numbers and spreadsheets, things that made sense in a world that suddenly didn't. I took solace in small victories, like when Karen informed me that Linda's transfer could indeed weaken her position in court, giving me a glimmer of hope for a fair outcome. Emily arrived on a crisp Saturday morning. As I hugged her at the door, I felt the weight of the past weeks lift, if only slightly. We spent the day talking, walking through the woods behind our house, trying to find some semblance of peace amidst the turmoil. She was my confidant, my sounding board, and I knew I had to be strong for her to set an example of resilience. That night, as we sat by the fireplace, Emily brought up something I hadn't expected. "Dad, have you thought about what you want to do after this is all over?" The question caught me off guard. My life had been so entwined with Linda's for so long that I hadn't allowed myself to think beyond the immediate crisis. "I don't know, Em. I guess I haven't really thought that far ahead." Her eyes were earnest as she spoke. "Maybe this is a chance for a fresh start. You always talked about wanting to start your own consulting business. Maybe now's the time." Her words planted a seed in my mind, one that took root and slowly began to grow. I had been so consumed with the fallout of our marriage that I hadn't considered the possibilities that lay beyond it. Maybe this was an opportunity to redefine myself, to carve out a new path that belonged solely to me. As the fire crackled and shadows danced on the walls, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. This chapter of my life was closing, but perhaps the next one held promise. A chance to rebuild and find justice, not just in the courtroom, but within myself. With Emily by my side, I knew I could face whatever lay ahead. After all, family was what truly mattered, and with her support I was ready to turn the page and step into the future. The days following Emily's visit brought a kind of quiet determination into my life, a resolve to not just survive this turmoil, but to emerge from it stronger, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. I clung to the idea of starting my own consulting business like it was a lifeline. It was a vision of a future where I wasn't defined by a failed marriage or a bitter divorce, but by my own choices and efforts. Linda and I continued to coexist in the same space, our interactions reduced to terse conversations about mundane household matters. The emotional distance between us was palpable, each of us retreating to our corners of the house, avoiding any confrontation that might tip our fragile equilibrium into chaos. It was exhausting, like tiptoeing across a minefield, but I was determined to hold my ground until the divorce proceedings were finalized. My meetings with Karen became the bedrock of my strategy for moving forward. She was relentless, meticulously building our case, poring over financial documents with a precision that left no room for doubt. I was grateful for her tenacity, her willingness to fight for what was rightfully mine. Each session with her was a reminder that justice was within reach, that the wrongs I had suffered could be addressed, if not fully rectified. One afternoon, as Karen and I sat in her office surrounded by legal paperwork, she leaned back in her chair and studied me with a thoughtful expression. "Have you considered how you'll handle any potential backlash from Linda?" she asked, her voice carefully measured. I hesitated, the question throwing me slightly off balance. "I'm not sure what you mean." Karen sighed, tapping a pen against her desk. "People can be unpredictable when they feel cornered. Linda might try to manipulate the situation to her advantage, especially regarding Emily. You need to be prepared for that." The thought sent a chill down my spine. Emily was the one person I wanted to protect above all else, and I couldn't bear the idea of her being caught in the crossfire. What should I do? Keep communication open with Emily. Be transparent about the legal process as much as she's comfortable with. And document everything, every interaction, every conversation. It might seem excessive, but it's vital to have a record. That evening I called Emily, the weight of Karen's advice pressing heavily on my mind. We talked about her classes, her plans for the upcoming break, and finally the ongoing divorce. I did my best to reassure her without sugarcoating the situation. "Dad, I trust you," she said, her voice steady and confident. "I know you'll do what's right." Her faith in me was both a comfort and a responsibility. I couldn't afford to falter. Not now, not when so much was at stake. As the weeks dragged on, the house became a battleground of unspoken tensions. Linda's demeanor shifted subtly, small gestures that hinted at her awareness that her grip on our joint life was slipping. She began to probe, asking about Emily's visits, dropping casual remarks about mutual friends, as if trying to gauge where my loyalties lay. I answered her with the careful neutrality I'd learned to adopt, revealing nothing, offering no hint of the resolve that was hardening within me. The less fuel I gave her, the less she could use against me. Despite the turmoil, or perhaps because of it, I spent more time fleshing out my plans for the consulting business. I started sketching out ideas, drafting a business plan, and reaching out to old colleagues for advice and potential partnerships. It was exhilarating, the thought of building something from the ground up, a venture that was mine and mine alone. One evening, as I sat at my desk surrounded by notes and spreadsheets, I received an email from an old friend, Jack. We'd worked together years ago, and he'd since moved on to a successful career in finance. He'd heard through the grapevine about my situation and offered his support, both personally and professionally. "Why don't we grab lunch sometime this week?" his message read. "I'd love to catch up and see how I can help." The prospect of reconnecting with someone from my past, someone who knew me before the mess of my marriage, was both daunting and invigorating. I replied quickly, setting a date and time, eager to bridge the gap that had grown between my present and the life I once knew. When the day of our lunch arrived, I found myself feeling unexpectedly nervous. The restaurant was a small, unassuming place we used to frequent, its familiarity a comfort as I waited at a corner table. Jack arrived shortly after, his presence a welcome reminder of the camaraderie we'd once shared. "Good to see you, man," he greeted me with a firm handshake, his smile genuine and warm. We talked about everything and nothing, the easy banter coming back as if no time had passed. As we settled into the rhythm of conversation, I felt a sense of normalcy returning, a reminder that life beyond the confines of my current struggles was possible. "So, tell me about this consulting business," Jack prompted, leaning forward with genuine interest. I outlined my ideas, the plans I'd been forming in the quiet hours of the night, and the vision I had for the future. Jack listened intently, offering insights and encouragement that bolstered my confidence. "You've got a solid foundation," he said, nodding approvingly. "I'd love to introduce you to some people who might be interested in partnering or investing." His support was invaluable, a lifeline pulling me further from the wreckage of my marriage and toward the future I was beginning to envision more clearly with each passing day. As we finished our meal and parted ways, I felt something shift within me, an acceptance that this new chapter, while born of pain, held promise and potential I hadn't dared to acknowledge before. When I returned home that evening, I found Linda in the living room, her expression unreadable as she watched me. There was a sense of resolution in her posture, a quiet acknowledgement that we were moving toward an inevitable conclusion. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of the usual edge. I nodded, setting my things aside. "All right." As we sat across from each other, the weight of the past months between us, I realized that whatever the outcome, I was ready to face it. For Emily, for myself, for the life I was determined to build. The time for reckoning had come, and I was finally prepared to meet it head-on. "We need to talk," Linda repeated, as I sat down across from her in the living room. Her voice was more measured than it had been in recent interactions, devoid of the sharpness that had come to characterize our exchanges. It was almost unsettling, this newfound calm. I braced myself for whatever was coming. "All right," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, curious about what she had to say but wary of the direction this conversation could take. She paused for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking about everything. How we got here. What went wrong. And I know I've been difficult. I know I haven't made this easy for either of us." I nodded slowly, unsure of where she was headed but grateful for the acknowledgement. It was the first time she had admitted any fault, and though it didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal, it was a start. "I'm not trying to justify anything," she continued, eyes fixed on the coffee table between us. "But I think it's important we stop pretending like we can coexist here much longer, for Emily's sake, if nothing else." Hearing Emily's name in the middle of this conversation was like a punch to the gut. She was always the unspoken priority, the reason I was trying so hard to remain civil, to shield her from the fallout of our broken marriage. But Linda's words made sense, painful as they were. Our current living arrangement was untenable, a pressure cooker waiting to explode. "I agree," I said finally, my voice steady. "We need to make a decision about the house, and about next steps." Her eyes met mine briefly before she looked away again. "I've been thinking of moving out at least until everything is settled. I think it might be easier for everyone." Easier. The word lingered between us, heavy with implications. Easier to avoid the daily tensions, the silent battles waged in our shared spaces. Easier to focus on what needed to be done to finalize the divorce, to dismantle the remnants of our life together. "Where would you go?" I asked, not out of concern but from a practical standpoint. We needed to handle this like adults, for our sake and Emily's. "I could stay with a friend," she said, her voice almost defiant, as if daring me to question her intentions. "Or rent a place temporarily." I nodded, the idea settling in. It was a step toward independence for both of us. "That sounds like a good plan. Let's work out the logistics and make it happen." We sat in silence for a while, the enormity of what we were agreeing to slowly sinking in. Despite everything, there was a part of me that mourned the loss of what had once been. We had built a life together, shared dreams and plans, but whatever love had existed between us had been eroded by betrayal and distrust. "I'll start packing this week," Linda said, breaking the silence. "Once I'm settled, maybe we can talk about how to handle holidays and visits with Emily." The mention of our daughter brought a fresh wave of determination. I needed to focus on what mattered most, building a future where Emily felt loved and secure despite the upheaval. "Yes, we'll figure it out," I assured her, my resolve firm. "For Emily." After that, we fell into a practical discussion about timelines and logistics, a sense of relief mingling with the sadness. It was strange how a decision that marked the end of one chapter also signaled the beginning of another. A chance to redefine myself outside the context of our failed marriage. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Linda began packing her things, and the house, once filled with a tension so thick it was almost tangible, started to feel more open, the atmosphere lighter. I kept my focus on my work, on building the consulting business, and on maintaining open communication with Emily. I made sure to call her every evening, updating her on the situation with as much honesty and reassurance as I could muster. Each conversation solidified my determination to create a stable environment for her. She was handling the situation with a maturity that both impressed and pained me, a reminder of what was at stake. "How's everything going, Dad?" Emily asked one evening, her voice a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. "Things are moving along," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Your mum is going to stay somewhere else for a while until we figure everything out." She was silent for a moment, processing. "Do you think that's for the best?" "Honestly, I do," I said. "It's going to be hard, but it'll be better for all of us in the long run." "Okay," she said softly, her trust in me implicit. "Just let me know if you need anything." Her words, simple as they were, reinforced my commitment to this new path. I couldn't afford to falter. Not now. Not with so much at stake. As Linda's moving day approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The hurt, the betrayal, and the slow realization that sometimes the best way forward is to let go of what no longer serves you. When the day finally arrived, Linda and I exchanged a few polite words. There was no animosity, just a shared understanding that this was the right course of action. As she drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and a hint of anticipation for what lay ahead. I stood at the window for a while, watching until her car disappeared down the street. Then I turned back to the house, my house. It was time to rearrange, to rebuild, and to reclaim my life. Not just for me, but for Emily and the future I was determined to create. This was just the beginning. In the following days, the house felt both familiar and foreign. There was a quietness that I hadn't experienced in years, an absence that was both liberating and unsettling. Linda's departure had left a void, a reminder of what once was, but also an opportunity to redefine what could be. Each room was a canvas, waiting to be repainted with new memories, new routines. I started by rearranging the furniture, a physical manifestation of the internal shifts I was going through. The couch moved to a new corner, the dining table angled differently, the books rearranged on their shelves. It was a small act, but it felt significant, a way to imprint my presence more deeply in a space that had been shared for so long. Emily called every evening, her voice a lifeline amidst the solitude. I could tell she was trying to be strong, to adapt to the changes as best as she could. Her resilience amazed me, and in those conversations I found a renewed sense of purpose. "Dad, did you get my letter?" she asked one night, her voice laced with a hint of anticipation. "Letter?" I replied, puzzled. "I haven't checked the mail today. Let me go see." I stepped outside, the cool evening air a welcome contrast to the warmth inside. The mailbox was a short walk down the driveway, but it felt like an expedition into the unknown, a small adventure in the midst of routine. Inside, amidst the usual bills and junk mail, was a letter with Emily's familiar handwriting. I took it back inside, sitting down at the kitchen table to open it. Her letter was simple, heartfelt. She wrote about her days at school, her friends, and the little things she missed about home. But what struck me most was the section where she talked about the future, about how she hoped we'd find happiness in our new lives, even if they were separate. "I know it's hard now," she wrote, "but I believe in us. I believe we can find a way to be happy again." Her words were a balm, soothing wounds that I hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. I realized how much I needed to hear that, to know that she still believed in us as a family, albeit a different one. As I folded the letter back into its envelope, I felt a renewed determination. Emily's faith in us was a reminder of what was truly important. I needed to focus on building a stable foundation for her, for both of us. The following weekend, I decided to tackle the backyard. It was something Linda and I had always talked about, but never had the time or the inclination to really address. Now, it felt like the right project, a tangible way to channel my energy. I spent hours clearing weeds, trimming bushes, and envisioning a space where Emily and I could spend time together. I imagined a small garden, maybe a swing, something that would make her feel at home when she visited. As I worked, I thought about the conversation Linda and I had had about the holidays. It was going to be strange navigating those traditions apart, but I knew we could find a way. We had to. The transformation of the backyard was slow but rewarding. Each evening I'd step back, assessing the progress, thinking of how Emily would react when she saw it. It felt good to have a project, something to invest in that held the promise of joy and togetherness. At night, the house was quieter than ever, the absence of Linda palpable only in the silence. I found solace in reading, in the occasional movie, and in the quiet conversations with Emily. We talked about her school projects, her friends, and sometimes about her mum. She was curious, asking questions about the past, about how I was handling things. "I'm okay," I would assure her, though the truth was more complicated. I was navigating a maze of emotions, grief, relief, hope, but I was learning to find peace in the uncertainty. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, the phone rang. It was Linda. Her voice was tentative, as if she was testing the waters of a new relationship. "Hey," she said, "I was thinking about the holidays. Do you want to come up with a plan? For Emily's sake." It was a conversation I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The holidays were a minefield of memories and expectations, but they were also an opportunity to create something new. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I think that's a good idea." We talked about Thanksgiving first, deciding to split the day between us. Christmas would be more challenging, but we agreed to be flexible, to prioritize Emily's experience over our own discomfort. As we spoke, I realized that despite everything, we were still a team where it mattered. We both wanted the best for Emily, and that common goal was enough to bridge the gap between us, at least temporarily. After we hung up, I returned to the stove, stirring a pot of pasta, the steam rising like a promise of better days. I thought about Linda, about our conversations, about the future. There was no easy path forward, but there was a path nonetheless. I was learning to embrace the uncertainty, to find strength in the things I could control and let go of what I couldn't. It was liberating in its own way, a reminder that life was a series of moments, each with its own potential for growth. As I sat down to dinner that evening, I felt a quiet contentment settle over me. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, but it was enough. It was a start. This was my life now, different, challenging, but full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, I found myself settling into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. The transformation of the backyard was slowly taking shape, mirroring the changes within me. Each morning I'd rise with a sense of purpose that had been absent for so long, a quiet determination to carve out a life that, while different, could still be fulfilling. Emily and I continued our nightly calls, and they became the highlight of my days. Her optimism was infectious, and even when she shared her struggles, there was a resilience in her voice that reminded me so much of her mother. It was a bittersweet realization, but one that I cherished nonetheless. One evening, as we talked about her upcoming school dance, I could hear a mix of excitement and anxiety in her voice. It was her first big event since moving to a new school, and I knew she was nervous about fitting in, about finding her place. "Are you going to go?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I think so," she replied. "I mean, I want to. It feels weird, you know, not knowing anyone really well yet." "You'll do great, Em. Just be yourself. People will see how amazing you are." She laughed softly, a sound that filled the empty spaces around me with warmth. "Thanks, Dad, I'm trying." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time, thinking about how much had changed in such a short period. Emily's courage to face the unknown was a mirror to my own journey, and I found myself drawing strength from her in ways I hadn't expected. The backyard project became my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in physical labor and allow my mind to wander. The garden I envisioned was beginning to take form, each new addition a testament to the future I was slowly building. I imagined Emily's laughter filling the air as she swung gently under the shade of the oak tree. Imagined us planting flowers together, our hands covered in dirt, our hearts in sync despite the distance. But beneath the surface, there were still unresolved questions, lingering doubts about the future. Linda and I had been civil in our interactions, focusing on Emily's well-being, but the spectre of our unresolved issues loomed large, casting a shadow over my newfound peace. One afternoon, as I was clearing out old brush, I found a box tucked away in the corner of the shed. It was dusty and worn, a relic from a time that felt both distant and immediate. Inside, I found a collection of old photos, albums filled with memories of family vacations, birthdays, and everyday moments that had once seemed so ordinary. As I flipped through the photos, I was struck by the smiles, the laughter frozen in time. There was happiness captured there, a testament to the good times we'd shared, despite the turmoil that later ensued. It was a reminder that not everything was lost, that the past could coexist with the present, informing it without overshadowing it. I decided to keep the box, a touchstone for the days when the weight of change felt overwhelming. It was a piece of my history, of Emily's history, and as painful as some of those memories were, they were also a part of who I was, of who we were as a family. The holiday season was fast approaching, and with it the need to finalize plans. Linda and I had agreed to split Thanksgiving, and while it seemed manageable, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending chaos as I thought about Christmas. One evening, as I sat down with a cup of coffee after a long day in the yard, the phone rang. I recognized Linda's number, and for a moment I hesitated. Our conversations had been pragmatic, focused, but there was always an undercurrent of tension, the unspoken questions about what had gone wrong and why. "Hey," I answered, trying to keep my tone light. "Hi," she replied. "I was thinking about Christmas. We should figure out what we're doing sooner rather than later." "Yeah, I agree. Do you have any ideas?" "I was thinking maybe we could still do Christmas Eve together for Emily's sake. We could have dinner, do the presents, and then she can spend Christmas Day with me. Would that work for you?" It was a generous offer, one that showed we were both committed to putting Emily's happiness first. Yet it also meant stepping into a world of memories, of traditions that were now fractured. "That sounds good," I said finally. "Emily will love it." As we hashed out the details, I found myself grateful for Linda's willingness to compromise. Despite everything, there was still a sense of partnership between us, a shared understanding that our differences didn't negate the years we'd spent building a life together. It was a small comfort, a reminder that even in the aftermath of betrayal and heartbreak, there was room for healing, for new beginnings. After we hung up, I sat for a long while, the darkness outside pressing gently against the windows. I thought about the holidays, about the new traditions we'd have to create. It was daunting, but also thrilling in its own way, a chance to redefine what family meant, to embrace the unknown with open arms. As I got up to turn off the lights, I glanced at the box of photos resting on the table. There was a sense of closure in its presence, a reminder that while the past was a part of me, it didn't have to dictate my future. This was my life now, different, challenging, but full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next,